Hi everyone, it's Lindy on here from Pink Whisper Designs. Today we're going to make this fun edge-to-edge graduation shaker card. And if you haven't made an edge-to-edge card yet, you'll really want to watch this because this is so much fun. So let's go ahead and get started. For stamps today, I'm using the Art Impressions stamps. We're going to be using that little elephant and the graduation caps, and then we'll be using one of those sentiments as well. And this is from the graduation set. For paper, I'm using the Strathmore Bristol Smooth 100-pound cardstock. And to ink up my stamp, I'm using the Versafine Onyx Black Permanent Ink. I've placed that in my mini MISTI, and I'm going to go ahead and stamp that a couple of times. So let's do some coloring. These are the colors I've chosen to work with here. We're going to be using gray, light green, blue, cobalt blue, and peach pink. And these are the Zig Clean Color Real Brush pens. So I'm going to start off with that pink color. And you can see that I placed a little bit too much down there. So all I have to do is grab some of that color off of his cheeks and scribble it up top there on my scrap paper. And so you can remove ink with these pens as well, which is really nice because you can get exactly the shade that you're looking for. It's very forgiving. So now I want to just shadow, just to get started here, I'm adding a little bit of a light gray color all the way around the edges. I'll be pulling this color in towards the center. Now I did quickly go back to the pink just to do his tongue. Now I'm taking that dark gray and I'm going to go ahead and add some shadows here, and I'm just going to do small sections at a time here. And I want to leave the tummy area almost white. That'll be the reflection right down the center of his tummy there. Now I will add a little bit more gray here around the ear. And what I'll do is just dull out that pink a little bit by blending that gray right into that pink color. And then underneath his trunk, I'm going to add a little bit of that darker gray and then just kind of blend that up towards the top of his trunk. And I'll do the same thing here up underneath the hat. Just anywhere I think there might be a little bit of a shadow there. I'll add a little light gray to the diploma. And then I'm going to go to this beautiful blue color and do the ocean on my little globe here. Again, just putting the color off towards the side and then pulling that in. I'll keep adding some shadows here though as I go along. So this card was inspired by the current Art Impressions blog challenge, which is called Shaken Not Stirred. So that was to include a drink, any kind of drink, lemonade or hot cocoa, or I'm going to be adding a glass of wine here at the end. I'm making this card for my son's girlfriend who's going to be graduating graduate school in December. So I thought I'd get this card ready for her, and I thought it would be cute to add a little glass of wine, a little celebration here for her and all her hard work. So here, again, I'm going to use that green color to just blend in on the land areas here and just kind of have some light and dark areas. So don't be too fussy here. So again, if you want to join in our challenge, I'll link to that on my blog so that you can take a look at that and even just look at all the inspiration that's over there. There's lots of inspiration to get you started. Now I'm going to that darker blue and I'm going to just add a little bit again underneath here on the cap and just add some shadows there. And just I'm removing ink again. If it gets too dark, I'm just scribbling that off onto my scrap paper. So I was trying to keep this card in the blues and greens. And then I'm adding a little bit of pink here for the elephant's ears and then cheeks, and then I'll add a little bit more pink later on when we do the little glass of wine. So here I'm trimming this out. This set does not come with the coordinating dies, but this is really easy to cut out. I'm leaving a little tiny bit of a white border all the way around. So I continued cutting that out, and you can see that there. Now I'm using my square dies. These are the square double stitch dies from Art Impressions, and I'll be using that largest one. So I'm placing it on a little bit of an angle here to make it easier to run through, and I've gone ahead and die cut that. Now I've got these acrylic blocks. These are from the Watercolor travel box from Art Impressions, and you get 3 little acrylic blocks and a watercolor palette as well. So I'm grabbing that largest acrylic block, and then I'm going back to that same stamp set, and I'm going to take that little cluster of graduation caps. I'll go ahead and place that on the acrylic block, and then I'm using my Hero Hues Unicorn Pigment ink to do my stamping. I'm going to just prep this paper first with my anti-static powder tool, and I'll just place that powder all over the front of this. I don't want any of that powder to stick when we do our embossing. So I'm going to go ahead and ink this up, and then I'll just stamp this all over this background. I'm going to start in the center here and then just work my way around the edges, just kind of turning the stamp in different directions here. It is a little easier to flip the stamp over and ink it up from the back, especially when you're using some of these thicker inks. You just have a little bit more control over how much ink you place on there. Now, I couldn't really see where I was stamping, so I decided to do some embossing. I'm using the Ranger Superfine Detail White Embossing Powder. So I'll go ahead and emboss these that I've already stamped, and then I'll be able to see where I need to stamp the rest of these. So I'm going to use my heat tool and go ahead and emboss these. I'm just letting it heat up first before I go to my paper. And you'll know that these are embossed when they're shiny. They'll be nice and shiny. If there's any dull areas, you know you haven't completely embossed it. So there you can see how shiny those are. So now I'm going to go ahead and continue inking this up and stamping this pattern all around the background here. And by the way, if you really love this little graduation set, you might want to check out a card I did, which I have posted up above there, a mini slimline grad card. And I used the Jane Davenport Mermaid markers to do my coloring. I'll put a link for that down below and on my blog as well. So you just want to fill in any little open areas here now. And by applying the powder, I can see a little bit easier where I've already stamped. But you do want to be careful if you're applying the powder and you haven't heat set it yet, because you could end up smudging it. So I'm going to go ahead and heat set the rest of this panel. And now all of our little graduation caps are embossed. So now I'm using my Hero Hues Reactive inks, and I've got Key Lime Fizz, Splash, and Blue Hawaii. I'm just going to place those right down on my glass medium mat. I've got my Distress sprayer, which just has water in it, and I'm going to go ahead and get those wet, and then I'll just place this panel right down into these inks. This is just going to give us a beautiful watercolor, and where that embossing is will resist that color. So those little graduation caps will stay nice and white, and the color will go in between that embossing. So here you can see that I've got that beautiful watercolor background here. And just keep dabbing it on. You can use your finger just to move that ink around a little bit if you want to. And I did want to keep the background fairly light, so I'm just going to heat set this. And I'm just dabbing off just a few little the excess there right around the edges. I just don't want it to puddle there on the edges. Now I can go ahead and heat set this. Now, if you wanted it darker, you can go ahead and do this again. You can do this multiple times and just keep layering up the ink, but I do suggest heat setting it in between. So you can see how pretty that looks now. And you can see that where those little graduation caps are, that has resisted the ink. So I'm just taking the plates from my die cutting machine and placing that on top of that for a little while just to flatten that out a little bit. Now I've gone back to that blue Hawaii and I've placed some on that acrylic block that we used before. I've spritzed it with a little bit of water and I'm just spattering this panel. So I'm just basically flicking that ink down onto this panel and you can see that beautiful spatter effect that we get. Now going back to that blue Zig Clean Color Real Brush pen, I'm going to go ahead and color in all of these little graduation caps. And I'm not being real fussy here, I'm just adding a little bit of color to each of these. And that'll just make these pop off this background a little bit more. And what's kind of interesting is that blue from the Zig marker will blend in a little bit with some of these colors. So the graduation caps will take on some different tones depending on what background color was behind there. So now I've got my little elephant and I want to create the little pouch for my shaker mechanism. So I'm going to go ahead and I've taken one of these little storage pockets. You could use some acetate here if you want, but I do find these packets are a little bit more flexible. You could also use packaging that you get with your stamps as well. So I'm going to cut that down to size and then I'm grabbing my 1/4 inch score tape. I'll be placing that tape all around the edges and I've already trimmed off the corners on my storage pocket there. That will just make it easier to fold in these corners. I like to use my bone folder to press out the backing on the score tape. It just makes it a lot easier to remove the backing. And now I can go ahead and place this panel right back down on this plastic and then I'm going to fold up each of these sides. Now I just want to fold up 3 of the sides because that 4th one we're going to be leaving open to create a little pocket for our shaker elements. So for shaker elements, I'm using the iridescent hearts and stars from the Martha Stewart collection, and I've had these forever. I will list these down below as well as all the other products I've used today. So I'm using a blue, green, and the clear ones as well. So I'm going to go ahead, and what's really nice about these edge-to-edge shakers is you can really fill up these pockets. This is so much fun. You really have a lot more area to place your little shaker elements in. So I'm using these little stars because I thought that would be great for a graduation card. You could use anything here. You could also die cut some confetti as well and place that inside here. So whatever you want to do. Now I'm going to remove the backing from that last side. And now our shaker element is all sealed all the way around. And I'm just pressing that out with the bone folder just to make sure I get a nice seal there. So let's go back for the sentiment to this same set. And then I'm using one of these little dies from Art Impressions. And these are the flag double stitch dies. And that sentiment says, "You're kind of a big deal." And I just think that's so cute. So this little banner is going to have a little stitched edge around it, and I'm quickly running it through my Sizzix Sidekick machine. Let's place that banner inside our mini MISTI, and I'm using my Tombow adhesive just to hold that down temporarily. So I'll grab that sentiment and place it in my mini MISTI. And to ink this up, I wanted it to be multicolored. I wanted to bring back in the blues and greens that we used earlier. So I'll be using these Jane Davenport blenders. This is just a dual tip blender. And I'm going to go ahead and go back to those same 3 ink pads that we used before. I'm going to start with that darkest one. So I'm placing a little bit of ink on that applicator and I'm going to dab it onto my sentiment. I'm starting at the bottom here and then I'll be layering on those other 2 colors. So I'm just going to flip that applicator tool over there and then I'll apply the next color. And again, just kind of a dabbing motion here. I want to get plenty of ink on here. And then I'll flip that little blender around and do the green. And I'm kind of blending those colors into each other here. And then I can go ahead and stamp that. Now I did want it to be nice and dark, so I'm going to go ahead and do that same thing again. So you can do this as many times as you need to. So I'm going to start again with that darker color and go to that medium blue and then add that green. And I'll go ahead and stamp that another time here. And this just adds a little more interest to your sentiment here. So you can see that up close. So now going back to those little stars, I'm going to add a few to this little sentiment banner. I'm adding a few of the blue ones and the green ones. I'll add 3 up at the top and 2 down at the bottom there. And I'm using my Nuvo Deluxe adhesive to attach these. And I'm also using my Marvy jewel picker to pick those up. And you can see that up close. So now I've got a piece of cardstock that measures 4 1/4 by 8 1/2. I'm going to go ahead and score that right in the middle at 4 1/4. So this will make a 4 1/4 by 4 1/4 inch square card. So I'm going to go ahead and fold that and press that crease out with my bone folder. And now I can go ahead and attach this panel to the front of my card. So I'm going back to my 1/4 inch score tape, and I'll just place plenty of that on the back of this just to make sure this lays nice and flat. And then I'll remove the backing. And then I'm just going to center it on the front of the card. Now I'm going to make this a top folding card. So let's go ahead and take a look at these 2 elements here. So I want that little banner up towards the top there, and I'm going to line it up with this, this pretty background that we have. So again, I've placed some score tape on the back there. I'm just going to make sure that I have plenty of it on here, so I'm just going to cut away any excess. And again, I'm going to line that up with the top of this colored panel here. Now I can go ahead and do the same thing for my little elephant. So now I'll grab my white gel pen. This is the uni-ball white gel pen, and I'm going to add some highlights. Just a few here and there. I'm just testing it on some black cardstock just to make sure it has a nice smooth flow to it before I go to my cardstock. Again, this will just make things pop out a little bit more. So now I want to add that little glass of wine. I'm going to use the wine here that's in this lady's hand. And this stamp set is called Wine Divas, and I've listed that up top for you as well. And I'm just going to place this right on my glass media mat. You could just place it on an acrylic block, whatever's easier. And I'm going to cut a little piece of the sticky part of a Post-it note. Her thumb is over the edge of that wine glass, and I want to remove that when I do my stamping. So I'm just masking off her thumb and a little bit of the glass there as well. I'm going back to the Versafine Onyx Black ink, and then I want to remove that mask before I do my stamping. Make sure you remove the mask before you do this. And then I'm just going to press my cardstock right down on there and pick up that image. Now you can see that part of that glass is missing. So now what I'm going to do is take my Faber-Castell 0.1 millimeter black pen, which is a permanent black, and I'll just fill that in. I'm going to heat set that quickly before I do my coloring, and I'm using haze blue and sugared almond pink to color this in. I'm adding a little bit of pink, and this is just to blend in with the little bit of pink that we used on the elephant's ears and on his cheeks. So I'm adding the darker color down towards the bottom. I'll use that same color to do my blending and just pull that up a little bit towards the top. And then I'll grab some of that haze blue just to add a little tint to that glass. Just cleaning off my blender pen here to make sure I don't transfer any of that pink. Now I can go ahead and trim this, and I am going to cut right along the lines of this stamp. And this was really easy to cut out. So once I had that cut out, I'm going to go around the edges of this with my black Tombow pen and just finish off those edges a little bit. Now I can go ahead and attach this to my card as well. And I just think that adds a cute little element to this card, and I think my son's girlfriend will get a kick out of this. Now I did decide to add a little bit of glitter and sparkle to that wine, and this is the clear Wink of Stella glitter pen. You can take a closer look at this card and you can see that really fun edge-to-edge shaker card that we have and all those fun little stars inside there. And again, use anything that you have for these little shaker elements. You could die cut or use your punch to punch out a bunch of little stars. So I really hope you enjoyed today's video. If you did, please hit the like button and subscribe. And don't forget to visit me at pinkwhisperdesigns.com. As always, thank you so much and have a great day. Bye-bye.